Bring the Alpha forward. Gray Yoshiko emerged from the shadows, his presence commanding absolute silence. 20 years. 20 long years since anyone had seen him smile. The pack members who remembered that warmth were fewer now, their memories fading like old photographs. Alpha, please hear their plea. Silence. His voice was ice itself, cold, merciless, final. The temperature in the great hall seemed to drop 10 degrees when he spoke, frost creeping along the ancient stone walls like crystalline fingers reaching for something they could never grasp. Stripped them of their ranks, exiled them to the outer territories. The condemned wolves fell to their knees, tears streaming down their faces. They had children, families, and lives built within these walls. But Gray's expression remained carved from granite, unmoved by their anguish. Alpha, please, we have pups. You should have considered that before betraying pack law. Not a flicker of emotion, not a hint of compassion. His storm-gray eyes held nothing but winter's endless cold. Madame Yoshiko watched from the high seat, her heart breaking as it had broken 1,000 times before. 20 years of this curse. 20 years watching my grandson become a monster. The boy who used to laugh, who used to care, buried under ice so thick I fear will never reach him again. Meanwhile, deep in the borderlands, where pack law barely reached, a forest erupted in snarls and screams. 3 small pups huddled against a boulder as rogue wolves circled them like predators savoring a hunt. Their eyes glowed with malicious hunger, teeth bared in savage grins. Should have stayed in your territory, whelps, the leader growled, his scarred face twisted with cruel amusement. Now you're just meat. The largest rogue lunged, claws extended, and a blur of silver light slammed into him with bone-crushing force, sending him sprawling across the forest floor. You'll have to go through me first. Hester Conroy stood between the rogues and the pups, her small frame radiating power that seemed impossible for an Omega. Her eyes glazed silver, ancient, terrifying, magnificent. Alone, Omega? The rogue leader threw back his head and laughed, a sound like grinding bones. This just got interesting. Kill her. The Shadow Moon Pack territory was unlike anything Hester had ever seen. Ancient stone structures, carved with runic symbols, rose from the earth like sleeping giants, their surfaces covered in frost that never melted even in summer's heat. Wolves moved through the courtyards with military precision, their movements synchronized, their eyes tracking her every movement with a mixture of curiosity and deep-seated suspicion. Stay close, Madame Yoshiko instructed as they crossed the main square, her voice carrying a warning Hester couldn't quite decipher. My grandson does not take well to surprises, or strangers, or anything really. Hester's silver eyes swept across the territory, her healer's instincts noting everything wrong with this place. The wolves walked with their heads slightly bowed, shoulders hunched as if expecting punishment. Conversations died the moment they sensed an authority figure nearby, words swallowed before they could be judged. Even the pups played quietly in designated areas, their natural exuberance dampened by fear, as if afraid their joy might draw unwanted attention. What kind of alpha rules through fear of his own pack? What happened here to make everyone so terrified? They entered the great hall, and Hester felt the temperature drop so dramatically she gasped. Not metaphorically, actually drop, like stepping into a winter cave. Frost crept along the edges of the ancient stone walls in delicate, deadly patterns, and her breath misted in the air with each exhale. The massive space felt more like a tomb than a throne room. Grandfather. The voice came from the shadows at the far end of the hall, smooth and cold as a blade drawn from ice water. Each word was perfectly enunciated, perfectly controlled. You've brought a stranger into pack territory without my permission. Care to explain why I shouldn't consider this an act of treason? Grey Yoshiko emerged into the light, and despite everything Hester had heard about his cruelty, her breath caught. He was devastating in the way winter storms are devastating. Beautiful, dangerous, impossible to look away from. Tall and powerfully built, with silver-white hair that fell across eyes the color of a winter storm. His features were carved perfection. Sharp jawline that could cut glass, high cheekbones, full lips that looked like they'd forgotten the shape of a smile decades ago. He wore traditional alpha leathers marked with his rank, and power radiated from him in waves that made her omega instincts scream at her to lower her eyes, to submit, to bare her throat. No. Hester lifted her chin defiantly. I didn't survive rogue wolves to cower now. That evening, Madame Yoshiko found Hester in the quarters prepared for her. A small but surprisingly comfortable room in the healer's wing, far enough from the Alpha's chambers to be considered a safe distance, close enough to respond to emergencies. Moonlight streamed through the window, painting everything silver. You survived your first encounter with my grandson, the elder said, settling into a chair with the weariness of someone carrying decades of grief on her shoulders. That alone is remarkable. Most wolves can't maintain eye contact with him for more than a few seconds. He hates me. Hester touched the stone wall, which remained cold despite the fire burning cheerfully in the hearth. The contrast was unsettling. I felt it radiating from him like ice. Pure, absolute contempt. He hates everyone, child, including himself, especially himself. Madame Yoshiko's eyes grew distant, focused on memories that clearly caused her pain. But it wasn't always this way. 20 years ago, Grey was different. Warm. Compassionate, merciful. The kind of alpha who would give his last meal to a hungry pup, who stayed up all night with sick pack members, who actually laughed. Hester sat across from her, drawn in by the raw pain in the elder's voice. What happened to him? What could possibly change someone so completely? His alpha ceremony, the night he was meant to fully claim his power and lead our pack into a new era of prosperity. The elder's hands trembled slightly as she continued. There was a challenge, a rival wolf named Thelma Love, furious that Grey had chosen duty and pack law over her obsessive, possessive pursuit of him. She demanded a trial by combat, and when Grey defeated her fairly, she fell to her knees and begged for mercy, crying about how she'd been wrong. He gave it to her. Hester could already sense where this story was heading, and her heart broke for the young alpha who had made the mistake of compassion. Of course he did. That's exactly who he was. Merciful, just, believing deeply in second chances and redemption. Madame Yoshiko's expression darkened with ancient rage. It was a trap, an elaborate, cruel trap. The moment he lowered his guard, the moment he offered his hand to help her stand, she struck him with dark magic. A curse woven from jealousy, rage, and obsessive love twisted into hatred. The weeks that followed established a pattern that became Hester's new reality. She shadowed Grey through his daily routines, pack council meetings where he delivered judgments with cold efficiency, territory patrols where he moved like a ghost through his own lands, brutal training sessions where he pushed his warriors past their breaking points. And through it all, he ignored her with the dedication of someone pretending a raging storm wasn't swirling around him. But Hester had survived 20 years in the borderlands. She knew persistence. She knew patience. And she absolutely knew how to be annoying when necessary. You're favoring your left side, she observed one morning as Grey trained with his warriors in the combat ring, her voice carrying across the yard. Old injury or just poor form? Not your concern, he replied without looking at her, his blade whistling through the air in a perfect arc. Everything about your physical state is my concern. I'm your healer. That's literally my job description. I didn't ask for one. And yet here I am, contractually obligated to care about your well-being, whether you like it or not. She stepped into the training ring, earning shocked gasps from the watching wolves. No one interrupted the alpha's training, ever. Let me see it. Get out of my ring, Omega. His voice dropped to something dangerous, but Hester noted he'd stopped mid-strike. Make me, Alpha. The warriors froze like statues. No one challenged Gray. Not ever. Not even in jest. The last wolf who tried had been exiled within the hour. For a long moment, Gray simply stared at her with those winter storm eyes, that same flicker of genuine surprise from their first meeting crossing his face like lightning. Then, without a word, he turned his back on her and resumed training with even more intensity, each strike harder than the last. But that afternoon, as Hester was organizing her healing supplies, she looked up to find him waiting outside the healer's wing. Arms crossed, expression thunderous. 5 minutes, he growled. Each were clipped. Then I never want to hear about this again. Victory tasted sweet. The messenger arrived at dawn, his horse lathered with sweat, bearing the Conroy pack seal, a silver wolf beneath a crescent moon, symbols that should have meant family and safety. Hester stared at the summons with trembling hands, watching the elegant script blur as tears threatened, her face draining of color until she looked like a ghost. What is it? Gray appeared in the doorway of the healer's wing with that uncanny ability he had to materialize whenever she was distressed. His presence now a constant shadow she'd grown accustomed to over the past weeks. His eyes immediately tracked to her pale face, to her shaking hands. My father. The words tasted bitter, like poison on her tongue. He summoned me to the Conroy Pack territory. My stepsister Amy is having her claiming ceremony, and apparently my presence is required, as if I'm actually part of that family. Your stepsister. Gray's eyes narrowed, his alpha instincts clearly catching the venom in her tone. You've never mentioned family. I assumed you had none, because they're not family. Not really. Not in any way that matters. Hester crumpled the parchment in her fist, watching the expensive paper wrinkle. My mother was my father's true mate, but she was an Omega, common, unworthy of a pack leader in his social circle's eyes. When she got sick with the wasting sickness, when she became a burden instead of an asset, he took a second wife from a prominent bloodline and had Amy. He abandoned us to the borderlands, and I haven't seen him in 15 years. 15 years of silence. Something dangerous flickered across Gray's face. Not the cold indifference she'd grown used to, but actual anger on her behalf. And now he summons you like a servant? Like you should be grateful for the invitation. He wants to parade me as proof of his mercy and magnanimity. She laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. Look, even the bastard Omega daughter is invited to the grand ceremony. What a generous, forgiving father I am. I won't go. I can't. Yes, you will. Gray's tone left absolutely no room for argument. And I'm coming with you. The claiming ceremony began with traditional pageantry that spoke of old money and older bloodlines. Ceremonial drums whose rhythm matched heartbeats. Massive bonfires that cast dancing shadows across the assembled packs. The formal presentations that took nearly an hour. Amy stood at the center of the ceremonial circle in her silver gown that probably cost more than Hester had earned in her entire life. Alpha Marcus Stone at her side, looking every bit the powerful, wealthy heir she pretended to be. The moonlight seemed to love her, making her appear ethereal, untouchable. And now, Lord Conroy announced, his voice carrying across the plaza with practiced authority, clearly reveling in this moment of social triumph. My beloved daughter will demonstrate the sacred proof of her bloodline, a silver wolf gift that marks the Conroy lineage and has been passed down through generations. Amy raised her hands with theatrical flair, and a faint shimmer of light appeared around her fingers. Pale, flickering, barely visible, even in the firelight. It looked impressive to those who didn't know better, who couldn't sense the deception woven into every particle. The crowd murmured appreciatively, though Hester could see the pack elders exchanging uncertain glances, their experienced eyes catching what others missed. That pathetic display was nothing like true Silver Wolf power. It was smoke and mirrors, parlor tricks elevated to spectacle. "Is that all?" Gray's voice cut through the murmurs like a blade through silk, cold and utterly dismissive. Every head turned toward them. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. He stood at the edge of the circle with Hester beside him, his presence commanding absolute attention even here, in another pack's territory. Alpha Yoshiko, Lord Conroy's smile was strained, his eyes flashing with barely controlled irritation at the interruption. "How generous of you to attend our humble ceremony. As you can see, my daughter has demonstrated. I see a parlor trick." Gray's tone was utterly dismissive, each word calculated to wound. "Moonstone dust mixed with common healing magic, a theatrical presentation? Clever, certainly, convincing to the untrained eye. But hardly the legendary Silver Wolf power that your bloodline is supposed to carry." They returned to Shadow Moon territory in triumph, Hester's vindication sweet and complete. But victory tasted like ash and turned to horror when she found Gray collapsed in the training yard 3 days later, his body twisted in agony, warriors surrounding him in helpless panic. Ice had spread across his chest in crystalline patterns that looked almost beautiful in their horror, visible through his torn shirt, delicate, deadly fractals crawling toward his heart like frozen veins seeking to strangle the life from him. His skin was cold to the touch, frost forming on his lips, his breathing shallow and labored. He looked more corpse than wolf. "Gray!" Hester's healing light poured into him desperately, her silver power blazing bright enough to illuminate the entire courtyard. But the ice resisted with malevolent intelligence, pushing back against her power like a living thing. "Stay with me! Don't you dare leave me now!" His eyes opened, storm gray and unfocused, struggling to find her face. "Hester." The word came out slurred, confused. "Can't feel." "Don't talk. Save your strength. I can fix this. I can fix anything." But even as she spoke, Hester could feel the curse winning, could feel Gray's life force dimming like a candle in a hurricane. Madame Yoshiko arrived within minutes, her face grave as she assessed her grandson with the practiced eye of someone who had been watching him die for 20 years. "It's accelerating. The curse is moving faster now. We're running out of time." "Why? What changed? He was getting better." Hester's voice broke with desperation and confusion. The elder's knowing gaze moved between them, seeing the connection neither had fully acknowledged. "He's fighting the mate bond. The more he feels for you, the more he cares, the harder the curse strikes back. It's punishing him for daring to care again, for daring to feel anything resembling love. The curse was designed to feed on isolation, and connection threatens its very existence." Hester's hands trembled as she continued channeling healing energy into Gray's body, watching the ice retreat fractionally before advancing again. "There has to be something, some way to fight this." The summit of Great Pax was held in neutral territory, a massive stone amphitheater carved from a mountainside, where alphas gathered once every 5 years to discuss territory disputes, negotiate trade agreements, forge political alliances, and generally posture about their pack's superiority. Ancient stones held the weight of centuries of pack politics, of decisions that had shaped the realm. Hester stood beside Gray, acutely aware of the weight of dozens of powerful wolves assessing her, judging her worthiness to stand at the Shadow Moon Alpha's side, measuring her against every Luna who had come before. So this is the temporary mate. The voice dripped with such concentrated venom that Hester felt it like acid on her skin. Thelma Love emerged from the crowd like a viper sliding through silk, beautiful in the way poisonous things often are. She was striking in a cruel way, sharp features that looked carved rather than born, cold eyes that held no warmth, and the confidence of someone who'd never been told no, and couldn't conceive of a world where she didn't get exactly what she wanted. Until Gray.
Thelma. Gray's voice was flat, emotionless, but Hester felt tension coil through their bond like a spring wound too tight. I thought I made it clear 20 years ago that we have nothing to discuss, ever. That you posed duty over me, that you rejected what we could have been. Her smile was poisonous, practiced. Yes, very clear, darling. You've always been so articulate about your rejections. But temporary bonds are so fragile, aren't they? So conditional. Especially when the mate in question is nothing but a borderland omega playing dress-up in fine clothes. Hester felt the bond flare with Gray's suppressed anger on her behalf, but she kept her own face calm and composed. Years of surviving in the borderlands had taught her not to react to provocation. If you have something to say, Thelma, say it clearly. We don't have time for games. I'm saying you don't belong here. You don't belong at his side, wearing that mark like you earned it. Thelma's eyes glittered with malice. And when your little arrangement expires in, 8 months now? He'll finally realize what he should have chosen all those years ago. The aftermath of the summit brought more than just Thelma's public humiliation and social ruin. As Gray's warriors investigated the poisoning attempt with the thoroughness of wolves who'd failed to protect their alpha's grandfather, they uncovered something far more damning, evidence of a conspiracy 20 years in the making. Threads connecting back through decades of careful manipulation. Alpha, the head warrior, laid out documents, correspondence, and Waj'al artifacts on the council table with careful precision, his face grim. We found these hidden in Thelma Love's quarters and sealed behind powerful warding spells. Letters, detailed plans spanning 2 decades, magical components, and what appears to be a confession written in her own hand, perhaps kept as insurance or trophy. Hester stood beside Gray as he read through the documents with increasing horror, feeling his shock and rage building through their bond like a volcano preparing to erupt. Emotions so powerful they threatened to overwhelm her own. She cursed me. Gray's voice was hollow, broken, all his carefully constructed ice shattering to reveal the wounded man beneath. A night of my alpha ceremony, when I showed her mercy, when I tried to help her stand. It was always her. All of this. 20 years of ice, of isolation, of slowly dying, all because I chose duty over her obsession. There's more, Alpha. The warrior hesitated, clearly dreading what came next. She had an accomplice. Someone who provided detailed information about your mate, about Hester's true identity, her bloodline, her exact whereabouts in the borderlands. Someone who traded family secrets for personal gain. A second set of letters revealed the ugly truth in Amy Page's distinctive handwriting. Pages detailing Hester's silver wolf bloodline with clinical precision, her mother's illness, her exact location in the borderlands, her daily routines, her vulnerabilities. All of it traded to Thelma like commodities on a market, in exchange for magical assistance in stealing the Conroy inheritance and elevation to a status Phoebe never earned. Amy. Hester's hands clenched into fists, nails cutting crescents into her palms. She sold me out to the woman who cursed you. Her own sister. 3 days after the curse shattered like glass beneath their combined power, Madame Yoshiko stood before the assembled great packs in the same amphitheater where Thelma had tried to destroy them, fully recovered from the poisoning, his eyes bright with the profound joy of witnessing a miracle he'd almost given up hoping for. 20 years, he began, his voice carrying across the amphitheater with the weight of decades of grief finally lifted. For 20 long, dark years, I watched my grandson fade into ice and darkness. I watched him become a shell of the wolf he was meant to be, watched his warmth disappear degree by degree, until I could barely recognize the boy who used to laugh. I watched him roll through fear instead of love, watched him push away everyone who tried to reach him, and I despaired that I would die before seeing him whole again, that the last memory I'd have of him would be of ice and emptiness. Gray stood at the center of the ceremonial circle, with Hester at his side, their hands intertwined, their mate marks visible for all to see. He looked transformed, the ice in his eyes replaced with warmth, his posture relaxed rather than rigidly controlled, his expression open rather than frozen. He looked finally like himself again. But the moon goddess had other plans. Madame Yoshiko's gaze softened as he looked at Hester with genuine love and gratitude. She sent us the silver healer, the young wolf with the ancient power to cure any affliction, any wound, any curse, and more importantly, with a heart brave enough to love a cursed alpha, with the courage to walk into his frozen hell and refuse to let him die alone, with a stubborn determination to chip away at ice that had defeated everyone else. He raised his arms, addressing all the assembled packs with formal authority. I give my blessing to this union, not as a temporary bond born of desperate necessity, but as the eternal mating it was always meant to be, as the destiny that even dark magic couldn't permanently destroy. The crowd erupted in howls of approval and celebration, the sound rolling across the amphitheater like thunder, like the voice of the moon goddess herself celebrating their triumph over darkness. The end.
If alpha intensity, soulmate sparks, and thrilling wolf world secrets are your jam, subscribe now so you don't miss it. Fresh episodes drop every day, and the twists will have you hooked from the first howl.